welcome to the 495. I'm your host, Doug Sparks, editor-in-chief of Merrimack Valley Magazine. Back in the studio.
Back in the studio.
Not in the garage.
How's it feel?
It feels good. I mean, I was telling you before the show, I like broadcasting from the garage because you just feel very relaxed. I think it makes for a spontaneous conversation. I liked the setup. It was pretty cool. But there's a lot of construction going on in my neighborhood, and I was concerned. I knew I was pushing my luck.
All right, you come in. I'll go sit in my garage.
Right? Yeah,
do it that way. See how that works out.
Yeah, actually, that we could probably pull off. So yeah, I definitely enjoy that. But it's nice being back. It's funny. I've been out of. That also meant I was out of my office for a couple of weeks, and I have plants in my office, but they're succulents and cacti and things that normally don't need water.
Yep.
So I figured they'd be okay. The succulents were miserable, and the cacti were as happy and colorful as could be. So maybe I shouldn't plant them in the same pot. But it was interesting just to go back and see like you forget things. Like I was looking through the bookcase and I was seeing these sort of teacups and different things that I have that were so important to me. Before the pandemic, like I would drink from that teacup every single day.
But you see them in a whole new light, right?
Yeah, a whole new light. It's like an antique or something from your past. So the guest today is named T.R. Monaghan. She's written an excellent new novel called Sweet Jane. I have a copy in my hand right here. And I'm going to call you Teresa on air. Is that okay?
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay, all right. So Teresa, how are you doing today?
Good, very good.
Yeah, and how are you holding up in this crazy time?
Well, I've been working the whole time because the company I work for, we're essential, so I still go in. The hours were cut down for first few weeks, but and I'm back to normal schedule now. But today I took off.
Yeah. So speaking of and this is interesting. Your bio in the book isn't particularly literary. Like you have a full-time job. You're not a full-time writer.
No, of course, no, I'm not.
Yeah, so normally you see the bios and it's a list of like all the stuff people have done, and you're like proudly, Where do you work again?
It's a company called Mute Shield. It's a metal fabrication plant.
Yeah. Do you think that's an asset to a writer to not be full time? In other words, do you see the world from a different perspective?
I can tell you sometimes on my commute into work, I listen to quite a lot. Listen to NPR, and there'll be an author on, and they'll be asking them, "So, what's your process?" And they'll be saying how they wake up, and they'll start off right away, and they'll get a couple hours in, and then they'll get some coffee, make themselves some breakfast, and go for a walk, and then come back and do a couple hours of editing. And I don't think I could ever do that. I've never experienced that.
Yeah, sure.
So.
Right. So, when I first started reading this book, like initially, like within the first couple of pages, I remember thinking, well, this is really cool. This is something that we ought to see. It's like hard-boiled crime fiction set in Lowell, a city that like begs to be staged in that way. But it also reminded me initially of like Charles Bukowski and the Beats, and it had this kind of like hard scrabble feel to it. I thought less of that as I went on. And in other words, I saw less Bukowski as I kept reading and saw something else entirely. But I'm wondering, were the Beats and were people like Charles Bukowski an influence on you?
Yes, my brother Tom, he got me to reading Charles Bukowski. And then one of my favorites is Hunter S. Thompson, because you feel him experience in their life or whatever he writes about, even though it's fiction. And Henry Miller, all that kind of stuff. When I was young, this is in my late 20s.
Yeah.
So that's the stuff I was reading, and yes, it does stick with you. It does stick with you.
All right. Yeah. So for people who don't know what this book, they haven't read it, they haven't looked it up on Amazon yet. What's it about? What's Sweet Jane about? It's
a girl that she's. I use the word untethered because she's 15 years old at the start of the book, and she's not close to anyone in her family. Her father died when she was young, and she's reaching out for someone to have a connection with, and because all she feels is alone. And with her brother, she has one brother who gets in trouble and is incarcerated, but he hooks her up with someone that kind of took care of him when he was younger, and it's a bookie, a loan shark in Lowell. She goes to work for him as a runner. She's young, so she gets caught. you wouldn't get in the same trouble at 15, 16 as you would at 18 in that kind of profession. I mean, wouldn't be a blowback as well for the bookie. So she finds family amongst those people in, like, I don't know if I'd use the term underworld, but in that group, even though she's going to school, she's going to high school, So.
Yeah, it's. I was thinking as I was driving in today. One of the interesting things about the book is you see all these kind of networks, some of which are underground, some of which are on the federal level. And this plays out particularly in terms of ethnicity, like different kind of ethnic enclaves in Lowell. And then you have the protagonist, who is, you mentioned her being alone. She isn't a part of those networks. She has to learn how to kind of like navigate and deal with life in Lowell as an outsider. And a lot of times she ends up sort of siding with the people you would normally think of as maybe villains or criminals, but those are the people who protect her.
Well, I like writing about the idea that there is no moral right, moral wrong that's true. I mean, and people sometimes the group of people that she ends up working for or working with, I mean, they're good people and bad people on all aspects of the city, and they're all kinds of characters, and I mean, it's life. It's not something that's true or, I don't know how else to put it, but she carries the line through this story because she's keeping everything, keeping everything together that way.
Sure.
I don't know how to describe it.
Sure. So the book is set in 1971.
Mm-hmm.
For people who don't remember, for maybe young people listening to this, what was Lowell like in 1971?
Well, I did a lot of research at the library, the Pollard Library, and mainly it was Lowell's son. I mean, I was just going through that microfiche, and it made me busy, but I set articles, stuff that actually happened in that year, and I didn't get everything right, but I wanted to get the feel and the flavor of the times, and I hope that's, I mean, the economy was horrible, the joblessness, and it was a very, very rough time for the city. Also the buildings, it's not like it is today. It was much more economically bad.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being a kid in the 70s and having my mom drive me through the neighborhoods you write about, the Acre, right? Or the neighborhood you're particularly focused on, the Acre. And even when I was very young, there was this kind of air of menace. I remember people like standing outside of bars. And I remember in my mind, they looked like the Village People. I remember because Village People were big then, because it was a lot of guys with handlebar mustaches and leather vests.
Okay, yep.
So I remember thinking, oh, it's like the Village People, except like not very fun. Like these guys look like they have knives in their back pockets. I just remember that kind of like, that area just being very, very frightening. So, but that was the perspective of an 8-year-old.
Yeah, dangerous. I have friends that were living in Lowell at that time, and I got stories from them about what it was like to be on the Comet at night, or the fights that went on, and I mean, it was sometimes brutal.
Yeah. So why is 1971 relevant to 2020?
Oh, well, Hunter Thompson, he's got this quote, when the going gets weird, the weird pro. And I mean, that was relevant back then. During the Nixon time, during the Nixon era, and it's relevant today, I mean, with everything going on. And it just, I mean, there are so many, I think, relatable things today that were back when Nixon was in power. It's the unease.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So you don't, you mentioned that you work full time, that you have to kind of, and I imagine your writing process is pretty fast and pretty focused. What is your writing process like? Are you using a typewriter, laptop, or using a pen, or using a notebook? How did you put the book together?
Well, I did a lot of pen on notebook paper. It'd be out at lunch at work, or when I went on vacation with my family. I'd be mapping out different things I want to do with chapters. But I was going into work. I've been at the same company for 13 years. I worked for good people and with good people. I was going in, I'd get up at 4, go in at 5, and then I'd write at my desk until 8. I'd bring my laptop with me. I would just use my laptop at my desk. And I wasn't looking at the dishes that need to be done, the washing that need to be done. I wasn't looking, I should be cleaning the house or doing something. I mean, I was just
Sure.
examples because I'm a woman, but you know what I say, like, if you say things about like, oh, the lawn has to be cut, something like that, I mean, just.
Oh, I know. I definitely know. So how long did it take you to write?
Well, it was a 5-year process, but I went 6 to 9 months at a time, not touching it at all. Just because, I mean, you get bogged down in the day-to-day of things.
Sure.
But it was always there in the back of my mind. And when I went back to it, it would sometimes be for a furious few weeks of writing. Yeah. When I get inspired by something that I had in mind, and I would just get it down the best I could. Yeah.
Did you always want to be a writer? Did you want to be a writer when you were young?
No, I didn't think I could do it. I was a ferocious reader. I still am a ferocious reader. I tried to write poetry in my early 20s, and it was the worst poetry ever. Oh my goodness, it was so dark. It was so dark and bleak.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't start, like I said, until I was in my late 40s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what do you think inspired that change, or what kind of pushed you to say, no, now I have the confidence to do this?
I had that good idea. I thought I had that good idea for the story. And I found myself thinking of it over and over and over again, like, wouldn't that be great if I could get those ideas down on paper? And so I started doing that. And then when I had like 60 to 100 pages, I ran into someone, this gentleman, Richard McCarthy, he was from Lawrence. I ran into him at a family barbecue and said, I was just writing something up because we were talking about books. And he said, oh, that's really interesting. And he put me in touch with his son, who's a lawyer in New York. And his son, Carl, he reads stuff for other friends. He said, send it to me, I'll read it. And I got it back, and he did development editing. There were notes on every page. He's just such a generous man. And when I got that back, I had the confidence to actually see it through. I had the confidence to see it through because it felt like something, and it really did feel like something.
Yeah. Well, my friends know I've been pushing this book on them for a while. It's a great book. It's really good. It doesn't come across like a debut novel. It's a page turner. And then one of my favorite things, and I don't even know if I mentioned this in the review, is I just really like the characters. I like living with them. Even Jane is a fantastic protagonist, but even some of the minor characters, I didn't want to let them go. Like when I got to the final page, it was like, oh no, now I'm not going to be like in this, in the world of some of these other people circulating in the book.
Nice. Thank you. I tried to wrap them all up by the end. I tried not to put too many characters in that I couldn't, I didn't want people to get lost and different characters popping up all the time. So I tried to get those ones at least wrapped up a little bit by the end. So, they just all had their own arc, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you're working on a new book now, right? What's that called, and what's that about?
I'm bringing Bird White forward as a detective. So 10 years later, I'm putting it in 1980 in Lowell, and because I love reading Ian Rankin, and I just love mysteries, and I'm going to try to do a true police procedural. And I'm going to name it Blackbird Fly, like the Beatles song.
Yeah. We were talking about this before the show. This title comes from a Lou Reed Velvet Underground song.
Yes.
And now you're working on another book with a musical title. Does that mean you're a big fan of music? Are you inspired by music? Do you think your writing is inspired by music?
Yes, it is. I just as I said, I was really bad at poetry, but a lot of musicians, I think of that as poetry. Their lyrics are poetry to me sometimes, and I think they well.
Yeah.
The writing and and musicians it gels. Yeah.
Who are your favorite musicians?
Well, Neil Young I've seen like 5-6 times, and I love him because I could listen to him all the time. My husband's actually a Grateful Dead fan, and I'm not as much.
Yeah.
I'm more like you. So I think you're usually either Neil Young or a Grateful Dead fan. I'm not sure, but my brothers got me into rock music and Bowie when I was younger, and I love that stuff. And my brother Tom got me into punk music, and he'd bring me out to shows because I was a little bit younger than them, and my sisters would be off at college, and so he'd bring me to these shows of like punk bands, and I just love being part of that. I mean, that's just live stuff is great.
Yeah. So, do you think punk and rock and roll culture had an influence on the book? Is it reflective of that aesthetic?
Well, yeah, influence on me enough to put, yes, it's definitely all wrapped up into a package, yeah.
Yeah, it feels that, I mean, almost, you were talking before about having to write quickly and to be constrained, and I was almost, the first thing that popped into my mind was like the Ramones, right? Like the idea you might be in this environment where you only have a very, very short time to rehearse. Things have to be very fast. You don't have the fanciest amplifiers. What are you going to do? And they just mastered their limitations. You know what I mean? They were able to take this very limited space they have and make something, pretty, at least for me as a Ramones fan, like pretty darn timeless. And the book has that kind of feel, like it's raw, it's urban, and it's very fast paced. I mean, it's not short. I wouldn't call it short, but it's a page turner. It has that kind of rock and roll pace to it, where you're kind of hurtling through the events.
Well, that's very, very nice to hear.
Yeah.
Like I'm writing a scene now. I'm trying to write down an interrogation, and I'm really intimidated by it. Just being in that room, just have the conversation, back and forth. I know that's what I have to do. I'm just going to have to sit down and just write for a couple hours, right? Get it down. And sometimes that comes out really good.
Yeah.
Very, forced to do it, but it comes out really good that way. I hope it does.
Yeah. So who are some other writers who have influenced you?
Well, let's see. What would I mention? Connolly's good. I like him. I like J.D. Robb. I guess I get eclectic taste because it's back and forth. I just, I just a lot of mysteries. I like science fiction a little bit. I'm trying to think of.
What are you reading now?
Be on the spot. Well, it's. I'm not. I'm watching a lot of Netflix.
Yeah. Well, different people are handling this different ways. I've gone so far. I don't know why. I don't know what it is about my psychology. I don't know. I've gone very far in the other direction, and I'm like only reading right now. Like I'm bored by Netflix. I don't know what it is. So I watch, maybe 20 minutes of TV sometimes at night, and it's old stuff. It's old stuff from I'm watching a show from the 1980s that was on the BBC called Tales of the Unexpected. It was based on Roald Dahl short stories. I love that. So I watch a little bit, and then the rest of the time, for whatever reason, because of what's going on in the world, I want to hold the book. Maybe it's nostalgia. I don't know. I want to put my light on, hold the book, get in my easy chair, and read. Now, not everybody's like that. A lot of people are finding comfort in Netflix or comfort in TV, and it's that's fine. It's who knows why we're all pulled in these different directions.
I usually read right before I go to bed. Like I'll read. All depends on how tired I am. But it helps me relax at the end of the day.
Sure.
To read something. Yeah.
Hey, for people who want to pick this up, where's the best place to get this? Is it Amazon, or can you get it off like an independent website or book dealer?
Right now it's Amazon.
It's just Amazon.
Yes.
Okay, so Amazon.com is your friend on Sweet Sweet Jane. I'm going to hold it up right here so everybody
hold it in front of your face.
Hold it in front of my face.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Yeah.
There it is. So let's see, writing process. Okay. So now you've done this. You've achieved the impossible. You've done this thing. You've written a great book as someone who, at one time in your life never would have thought this possible. Do you have advice for anyone out there who's thinking of writing a novel?
Never let people get you down. I know, like, I wasn't going to do the self-publishing at first. It took me a while to come around to that decision. So I went the route where they said to send out letters and try to get an agent, try to, write those query letters that everything in your life is wrapped up into one page, and it's terrifying. But there's a lot of people making judgments of how much money they can make off you just by that letter. And there's so many letters that they receive that, they're not going to read a lot of the stuff. And was getting so frustrated. And so I would just, just to believe in what you write, what you're writing. If it sounds good to you, it's probably good. I reached out to Loom Press and Lowell.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't getting a response, from the letters I was sending. I'd send it to New York, and so I wasn't getting a response from anybody, because they just wouldn't ask for pages. So I did reach out to Paul Marion at Loom Press, and he just wrote me the nicest emails about saying how how he said people that the 70s and 80s was a great time in Lowell to write about, and that he was getting near retirement and he wasn't taking on titles. And he suggested I try the self-publishing route. And I just jumped in. I mean, I just went full throttle at that point. I was just went and started my own press and got, federal ID tax number and all that stuff. And you just need someone like that to just give a push a little bit and, be confident. Yeah.
Yeah. So I write some of the book reviews for the magazine, and all the books come across my desk. Some of them aren't appropriate for the magazine. Like they're books that I find interesting. Like occasionally I get poetry books that I personally enjoy, but I just don't think they're right for the demographic. And I get stuff from publishers, and I get stuff that's self-published. This to me didn't read like it was self-published, and it's like like I said, I'm an editor. Usually I can tell right away if this has been through the mill. This reads as though it's been through the mill. In other words, this reads as though people spent a lot of time putting this together and getting everything right. Did you work with editors? What was the process there?
I did.
Okay.
First call, it was so generous for me. And then after that, I then hired a copy editor and a proofreader. And I invested because I'm at this age, and I did this to me, this thing that was for me, it was just big in my mind that I wanted to get right, and so I invested. So it's a lot of money. I mean, they say self-publish, the average people put in is $2,000 to $4,000.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money because you can't count that you'll be getting that back or that you'll be making money off of what you put out there in the world. But I wanted, this was a gift to myself after all these years of working and making sure that I could get to this point. I guess I just, not that I deserve this. That's not the way I want to put it. Just that if I have this one chance, I want to be the best I can do.
Yeah.
And so I did hire people to help me. Yes, with that editing.
So a couple weeks ago, David Maloney was on. I don't know if you've read Barker House. He's a local writer, and that's his debut novel. It's really great. If you haven't read it, check out Barker House. And we were talking a little bit about the publishing industry, and my sense from him is that he kind of came into this at a really difficult time for unknown writers or for new writers. In terms of the numbers, I guess, books are pretty healthy if you're, J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
But if you're not, it's really tough. You can't do readings. You can't do the kind of publicity that you would normally be able to do. Do you have a sense that this period that we're living in, this cultural moment, has hampered your abilities to get this book into people's hands?
Well, yeah, people are using other avenues, I see now, and a lot of it, may be working, but I'm not good at marketing. I'm not good at putting myself out there. I mean, this is huge for me this day.
Yeah.
It's huge. I mean.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. I would love to do a reading sometime, and I think I got to work. I got to do it. I got to set that up. It's all that stuff. I have to do that.
Yeah. So speaking of readings, you've agreed to read a couple pages from the novel right now. We're going to
Sure.
give you a chance. I give you a chance to practice or to do what you would normally be doing in a Merrimack Valley library.
Okay.
Are you ready to do that?
Yes, of
All
course.
right, very cool. You have the floor.
Thank you. All right. Jade Regina Marie Rainey was too mature to lose herself in the mythical land of Puffinstuffs, Wilhelmina Witchy-Poo, and the Good Trees. Although she let her imagination run, she was sure to find their real-world counterparts in the city. No, from a young age, she dealt realistically with whatever came down the pike. At the moment, it was letting out a short, high-pitched scream as Ricky Trevino tugged her head back by the hair. The moment was quick and her eyes watered. She threw her hand up to soothe the spot on her head as she stood in the entrance of the school cafeteria. Why? Jane asked. He studied her reaction, her face, as if feeding off the shock and pain. He and his cousin Elliot were a tag team of sorts, and she was far from their only victim. They targeted the quiet kids, girls and boys, the kids who didn't fit in, ones who were a little threat to the two who in early spring lifted Jane by the arms so her feet dangled and walked her into the boys' restroom. There were boys at the urinals and three older kids by the window smoking cigarettes. They had all erupted into laughter as she struggled to get free, kicking her legs, shutting her eyes tight as her face reddened. The memory only added to the anger rising in Jane. She was sorry she'd stored her math and science books in her locker. They would have been a great weapon to swing at Rick below the belt. Wiped a satisfied look from his face as he walked around her farther into the lunchroom. She rubbed the back of her head. If she had learned anything in her 15 years, it was to stay out of the way. Don't be a burden. If someone hurts you, fight back or suck up the pain. It would not come as a surprise to hear Rick and Elliot had stepped up their game in the past year, torturing small animals or lighting fires on a whim. Thankfully, they had a lot of distractions and did not focus their sole attention on Magnus on her. She did her best, she thought, to melt into the background. She was small, with pale skin and long brown hair parted down the center of her head. Her father had told her she was beautiful. He said her blue eyes shined when she smiled, that when she laughed, the sound blew off his worries like wind on the seeds of a dandelion. But he was biased, and she had not heard him speak those words in a very long time. Very few people had made her laugh since. She headed for the lunch line and dug change out of her pocket for a square of pizza and threw the cost on offer for lunch. The green beans would remain in their designated square on the tray uneaten. You couldn't say no to the vegetables, so it would be emptied into the trash at the end of the period. Jane set her food onto the long table as she sat on the bench seat across from Emile Savard, a friend she had grown closer to in woodshop this last semester. With everything she did at home, she had been determined not to waste 2.5 hours a week in home economics, even if the shop was dominated by the boys. Emile wore his Buddy Holly eyeglasses with pride, no matter how much ribbing he received. He never invited trouble, but he was he was of the right height and size to defend himself in either case. She thought of him as a bear, big and lovable until seriously poked, and stepped back or lose a limb. He opened a small carton of milk and drank, needing help swallowing the crustless square of pizza he managed to finish in 4 bites. He wore a Keep On Trucking t-shirt. Its proliferation on merchandise was a trend the artist Robert Crumb said to despise. Hi, Dane said. She tapped the palm on her head to ease the sting. What's up? Ricky Trevino pulled out some hair. Emile finished his milk and crushed the carton in his hand. I'm going to kill him. No, you might beat Ricky down, but he and that psycho Elliot will come back at you twice as hard. They'll put you in front of a bus or plunk a bomb dart near the chest. Besides, they haven't messed with me in months. I can handle a trip in the hall, a few hairs out of my head. Well, I'll hurt him if you want. Just say the word. She lifted the cold pizza up in her hand. I'll let you know. They deserve more than a beatdown, he said. He pulled at the collar of his t-shirt. You want to do something after school? Can't today. I'm meeting my brother. He's out? Yep. Don't know where he's been crashing, though. Emile maneuvered out of the bench seat and grabbed up his tray. I got a jet. See you tomorrow. You know it.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's great. That's fantastic. Hey, Jane lives in a really violent world. Where does she
Yeah.
get her? And she's physically, kind of small and slight. I think, if I remember properly, she looks a little bit younger than 15, even, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
she's been the victim of horrible abuse throughout her life. She starts in the novel being abused. She's being abused on page one. Where does she get her resilience?
Definitely from the connection she makes after Michael sets her up to be looked after. I mean, definitely from knowing, she learns to know that these men that are around her at the bar, say, um, that they are looking out for her, even if it's not for her per se, but for she's part of their enterprise. She's part of at the beginning. I mean, before they get to know her and love her as they do.
Yeah. Hey, one thing that people should know about this book is a lot of the places, like you don't change the name of some of the places where Jane is
No.
going. So there's a Fury's Cafe. Did you, are you familiar, like you grew up in North Reading, right?
Yes.
But are you familiar with the Lowell bar scene and the Lowell nightlife? Did you have a
Yeah.
period of your time when you were kind of hanging out there?
Yes, my brother Jack brought me to Lowell when I was in my early 20s and introduced me to his friends. And then, then I started working in Lowell at the Dubliner for a bit. And
Oh,
I met my husband at Fury's
oh, okay.
playing pool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's neat to see. What is the role of Lowell in the novel?
Um, well, it's where I met my husband. I met my husband's friends, friends I love and adore. And I just, that's part of my life, that city. I just love that city. And, you know, it's just so alive.
Yeah, yeah. And this is something else I sort of mentioned in the review. I want people to read the review. I don't want to give away too much about it. But even though the city is very violent, there's a lot of abuse. It's a very dark place at times. It still seems like you write as though you love that place. And in a sense, Lowell itself is a character in the novel that rises up to deal with this sort of challenge that begins to occur over the course of the novel. So it's just funny, because you're writing about really difficult time in the city's history, but it's just clear that you love this place. How do you balance that? How do you balance writing about a place that has so much wrong that you also feel so connected to?
Well, the people in that bar, the bookie, the guys he's got running for him, they care about each other. They look after each other. They support each other. And even the Bird White, the police officer, there's just the people. I don't know. It's hard for me to even if there's violence around or life is tough or life is hard. There's still so much love and caring.
Yeah, right. Lou, do you have any questions
Yeah,
for Teresa?
I have a couple. Teresa, I'm curious about the relationship of the song and the book, and I'm guessing that the song did to you what music does to all of us. In other words, when we're listening to the song, we paint pictures in our mind. So, did the song give you the storyline? Did the song give you Jane? Or is it's just there because it seems to fit?
Um, Part of all that, she is Jane because of the song. I did use that, and also Sweet Sweet Jane. It's a juxtaposition, I think, on the song as well for the character. She's not. I mean, as she develops, she's not just sweet. I mean, even though she's a young girl, she's not a sweet young girl.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think she could be in that environment in that city at that time. And Lou Reed's music, he wrote about New York City, and he wrote about areas in New York City that were similar to Lowell in the early 70s. And he did not mean sweet in his music either. It's really just, I think, life kind of. I'm not saying that well, but I just mean that yes, I did choose the song because it fit for the time and the place, I believe.
And let me ask you about some of the challenges of authoring, some of the challenges of writing a novel, and I think two of the most important parts of any novel are character development, character arc, and dialogue. How did you feel? How did you feel going into the book? Were those strengths of yours?
I believe the dialogue was because it wasn't so much I'd read it back to myself, but anyone I would show pages to would say, "Oh, that sounds like a conversation." So they enjoy the dialogue, and I had no experience with it before. I just read it, so I'm glad that it came easier to me. And nothing is easy with writing either, though.
No, I'm with you.
There's a lot of days.
That's the type of writer I am. Nothing comes easy.
Yeah.
Douglas Adams once said, writing is the process of staring at a blank piece of paper until blood drips from your forehead. And that's my writing process.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the only people who think it's easy don't do it.
yeah.
Plenty of people think you just got to toss this stuff off.
Yeah, it just comes.
Right,
Have a cup of
exactly.
tea and it just comes, right? But the dialogue part of it is almost acting in a way, because not only do you have to write good dialogue, you have to write dialogue that's true to the characters, and those are characters who you aren't. You have to kind of get into them a little bit.
I use my own terms because I didn't go to school for writing, so in my head, I use my own terms of what I want to achieve, make it sound right, and I use the word flow a lot. Like when I'm saying to myself, "Does that flow?" Because I don't want the reader to get stuck, or they're like through a couple sentences and get stuck at something, and I'm always trying to make sure that works. So I just add it and add it and add it.
And
But it's a long process.
And one last question: who plays Jane in the movie?
Oh, oh that's funny. I want Jason Momoa to play Town Man, the bartender.
Oh, okay, yeah, or any character. Yeah, give me any character.
I try not to think of the relationship to movies when I read books. I just want to take them on their own merits. But this is cinematic. I mean, you could see this being made into a movie for sure.
Plus, you have to put a face to the characters, and more often you pull from celebrity.
Have you thought about that? Is that a dream of yours, that somebody's going to make a movie out of Sweet Sweet Jane?
I don't want to tell someone who I think Jane who I would want that, because I don't want to ruin it for the reader. Because when you're reading, you don't want to have that.
True.
Even though I put a picture on the front cover of Jane, it's still I don't know how else to put it.
That's a great point. Yeah, I like that.
I did start writing a screenplay because I've been even with the book, I know nothing about what I was doing, and I kept trying at different things, right? So because I'm like, it's only 110 pages I have to get to, but it's taking me a little time to get it down. But I'm trying to transfer it into a screenplay, just because I want to say to myself, I can do it. I want to try it.
Yeah. So one of my final points is, I think there's something strange when it comes to the arts, where people want to support local businesses, they want to support all sorts of local things, but when it comes to writing and when it comes to music, often, I think there's this I don't know if the word is like a stereotype, or there's something about the culture, maybe in the world, except for like New York or like a few key places, where people always think the good art is being done elsewhere, right? And I think that's a shame, because there are so many great writers in the Merrimack Valley, and it's sometimes like people will willingly spend all sorts of money on junk, but they won't spend $20 or $25 to support a local writer. So I'm getting on my high horse a little bit, but I hope people go to Amazon and support your writing. It's a great book, and I hope they read it. So the book is called Sweet Sweet Jane. I hope the next one doesn't take 5 years to write. I'm looking.
I'm trying to get it done in 2, but we'll see.
Okay, I'm looking. I'm a fan now, so I'm looking forward to it. Don't make me wait that long, please.
Thank you so much.
Keep
Thank you
drinking
for
the coffee.
reading it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was really great. So the author's name is T.R. Monaghan. The book is called Sweet Sweet Jane. You can buy it on Amazon. Next week on the 495, we have a very special guest, Richard Howe, Dick Howe, who is the Register of Deeds in Lowell. He's an historian. He's a blogger. You can look him up on richardhowe.com. He is going to be our guest, and we have a lot to talk about. So thank you very much. Thank you, Lou. I appreciate it.